learn how to get specific with your goals so that you can get what you want. So, um, when you're setting a goal, it's easy to just say, well, I want this or I want that. And I'm going to give you a couple of strategies here and some questions you can ask yourself that will help you to more clearly define your goals so that you're more likely to get it, because not everybody gets their goals. And sometimes it's because of deeper things that need to be cleared out. And that's what I help people with. So since we're on that subject, I'm Dan Ross from Silicon Valley Hypnosis Center, and it is my goal to help you get your goal, whether it's clearing out those things that stop you or like what we're talking about today, to just provide a little bit of coaching so that you can more clearly define what you want so you're more likely to get it. And this is important because sometimes people don't get their goals just because they're not clear enough on what it's supposed to be. So for example, somebody comes to me for weight loss and they say, I want to lose weight. Okay, so sometimes people know, yeah, I want to lose this amount, right? And sometimes they don't. Well, they're just like, well, I hadn't really thought about it. I just want to be thinner so I look better in my clothes. Like, great. So that's one piece of the goal. So you look better in your clothes. But how many clothing sizes, or what's your ideal clothing size for it? What's your ideal weight? And what's your time frame? Because sometimes people have and I'll cover this here in just a moment, a time frame that's either unrealistically too long or more likely unrealistically too short. So while we're talking about that, let's start to talk about how we actually do this. So SMART criteria has been around for a while, and that's an acronym here. So if you look at these 5 bullets, SMART, and there are some different words for these different criteria. The first one is almost always specific. The second one is always measurable. Some of these change a little bit, but it's just a nice reminder of what you need to be paying attention to. So for things like when I work with people on anxiety reduction, like, well, that's kind of amorphous, but we can say, well, what's your anxiety level now? 0 to 10. 10 is extremely high, 0 is low, just on average for the last week before you called me to help resolve it. They might say, oh, it's been an 8. I'm like, okay, good to know. So let's set our goal for that. What do you want that to be when we're done? And they often say 0. We're like, fine, we'll try to get as low as we can. But certainly if we get it down to a 2 or 3 on an ongoing basis, given the stresses of life, that'd be pretty useful to have, wouldn't it? Yeah. And then for me, since I'm always thinking this way when I'm working with people in sessions, I want to see that moving downward over time. So on average, moving down. So specific, somebody says, I want a better job. Okay, great. Or they hate their boss. They start with something they don't want, which is, by the way, this is another way of having specificity, because sometimes people define what they want by what they don't want, and that's useful to know, but it doesn't tell you where to go. So if I'm flying back to my local airport here in San Jose and I get into a taxi and the driver says, hey, where to? And I say, well, don't take me to Fremont. Whatever you do, don't take me to Fremont. It doesn't tell that driver where to take me, right? Now, if I say, take me to 5141 Moore Park Avenue, Suite 201, San Jose, California, 95129, they know exactly where to go. They can put that into their GPS. And that's why specificity is important. And we want to set the goal in terms of what you do want, not what you don't want. You can be aware of what you don't want, but we want to set the goal to move towards something, because again, the taxi example kind of tells you that. So that's one of the things when I'm coaching somebody when they come in is, I'm looking for these things. Oh, you tell me what you don't want. And it's common, right? Because we've had bad things happen. And so then that tells you what you don't want. But something like a job, I don't want another jerk boss, right? So, but how do you state that in the positive? I want, a kind and caring boss that will help me grow and will manage me just enough that I can learn and meet expectations, but give me enough free rein to let me do my thing. In other words, I don't want to be micromanaged, right? So I just turn that into a positive. I want opportunity for promotion. I want a short commute, right? So notice these are all criteria that either people hadn't thought of them, or sometimes it's just you thought of them and you didn't write them down. And for all goals, I would recommend writing them down just so you can have them in front of you. So that's something about specificity. And as cheesy as this seems, I have this little stock photo of all these numbers here, because if there's anything that can be measurable in terms of numbers, put that down, right? How much money, how much time, right? Somebody wants to lose weight, we might talk about working out. So great. How many calories do you want to burn each workout? How many times a week do you want to be working out? For how many minutes? What kind of workout do you want to do? Is it machines? Is it cardio? So that's specific, and then measurable, and then attainable is there's a fine line between setting a goal that's a stretch goal and an unrealistic goal. And that's also one of the bullet points on here. One of the criteria for attainable is that it's within your control. Because sometimes people, back to the boss example, I don't want my boss to be a jerk anymore. Well, great, send your boss in to see me, right? And we'll work on being a better boss. We'll do some soft skills coaching, right? But kidding aside, it's something that has to be within your control. Now we could turn that around and say, when my boss is acting in XYZ way that used to trigger me, and I used to call him or her a jerk for doing that, I want to now respond with just saying, oh, they're just having a bad day, or to have some kind of different response inside of myself. So that's kind of the difference here, is we want something that's in your control. I sometimes have people call me and say, hey, do you do hypnosis? Yeah, I do. Yeah, my son's 22 and he's sitting on the couch all day and smoking pot and playing video games. Can you make him go out and get a job and start his life? And I'm like, well, I can't force him to do anything, but if he's interested, have him call me. And then I'm like, yeah, he's not interested. I'm like, well, I can't force anybody to do anything. So attainable, part of that criteria is within your control. So that's something to look out for. And then we had the relevant or realistic. So again, I said there's different words you can use for these. So let's talk about relevant, because we want to make sure that the goal doesn't clash with some other goal that's important to you in your life. So let's say you really enjoy having family time. And let's say you want to go for a new job that has a promotion and more money and all those great things, but it means a lot more travel and a lot more work. So you might be working 45 hours a week now, and the new job is 60 hours a week plus, 2 weeks a month on the road. And that might negatively affect your relationship. So that's one of those things about sort of making it realistic, is let's make sure that when you get that goal, you don't break something else. When we talk about realistic, again, there's a fine line between what's realistic and what's a stretch goal, what regular goal, stretch goal, and something that's like not achievable. So back to the weight loss example, I have people come in and say, if somebody says, I want to lose 50 pounds because I'm going to a wedding. And I'll say, well, when's the wedding? And if they say 8 months from now, I'll say, yeah, great. You can lose that weight in a way where you can actually keep it off in some sustainable way. If they say, well, next month, and I'm like, well, that's not really realistic for you to lose that much weight that quickly, and certainly not healthfully. So, and sometimes, I once had somebody who came in who was barely making her rent, and she said she wanted to build some passive income, and she said, in 6 months, I want $100,000 a month in passive income. And $100,000 a month in passive income is possible, but not if you're trying to scrape together $600 for next month's rent and you have no money in the bank, and you don't have some things in motion. So I said, well, okay, what can we start with as a passive income goal that might be more realistic, just as a starting point? So maybe we do 1,000 a month, at some point in 6 months, which is much more attainable. Then maybe 10,000, and then maybe 50,000, 100,000. So It's making that goal, again, I want you to have what you want, just let's make it so it isn't like trying to jump to the top of the Empire State Building in a single bound, right? You may have to take the stairs or a series of elevators. And then the last one is the T for time bound. And it's just making sure that you know what the timing is for. We've talked about that already, but are there intermediate steps as well? Are there milestones? And just to be sure that you define what that is in terms of the timing. And a couple of there's a bonus piece here beyond the SMART criteria, which is when you set a goal, that I want you to get what you most want when you get that goal, because sometimes we pursue a goal and we think it will bring happiness or pride or something like that, but it doesn't. So back to the person who wants the better job and the better promotion, they think that they will feel happier because they finally made it. But what happens is they may end up being miserable because they miss their former coworkers, they miss their family, they're on the road all the time, and there's missed flights and missed soccer games, and they got the goal, but they didn't get the thing that they wanted. They didn't get the happiness. And so it's useful to ask your question, what will having that get for you? What will having that get for me? What's the emotion I get to experience when I have it? Because here's a secret. You can experience that emotion along the way while you try to reach the goal. So you don't have to wait until you get the goal to get that emotion. If you want to feel happy in your career, well, that's an internal state, and that's something I help people to build more positive internal states as part of our work together through self-hypnosis and other tools and practices. But what if you could have that along the way? So yes, go ahead and get that promotion. That's what you really want. But what if you could be happily pursuing that? What if you could end up not getting it and still be happy? So these are some useful things to consider when you're setting goals. And like I mentioned earlier, have them written down and then just kind of look at them occasionally, look at them once a day, just to kind of stay connected to it and to stay connected to those deeper emotions that you will feel when you actually get that goal. I'm Dan Ross from Silicon Valley Hypnosis Center, and go ahead and set some goals and use the criteria that I've covered in here that'll help you be more likely to actually get it and to get the deeper thing that you want.